President Natan Obed, Inuit Taparit Kanatami, President Clement
Sorry, do you need help
Charcier,
right now? Can Mark help you?
Apologies. There seems to be a technical glitch. All right, I shall continue. President Clement Charcier, Métis National Council, and Gina Wilson, Deputy Minister, Diversity, Inclusion and Youth, and Senior Associate Deputy Minister, Canadian Heritage. And we are happy to welcome the Honourable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, and the Honourable Mark Miller, Minister of Indigenous Services, as observers. Pour commencer, j'ai l'honneur de vous présenter Gina Wilson, sous-ministre déléguée principale Patrimoine canadien et sous-ministre Diversité, Inclusion et Jeunesse. Madame Wilson, à vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour, hello, Gina Wilson, Iginis, and I'm here on the territory of my ancestors and my current day relatives, the Algonquin Anishinaabe, and I'm very honored to be asked to do a prayer, offer a prayer. Thank you very much.
Miigwech, Deputy Minister Wilson. I would now like to welcome Minister Stephen Gilbeau to deliver his remarks.
Merci beaucoup, Gina, Madame Wilson, pour ces mots inspirants. National Chief Perry Bellegarde, President Natan Obed, President Clement Charcier, distinguished guests, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Kwe, Udlokut, Tansi, bonjour, hello. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that the lands on which we are located are part of the traditional unceded territory of the Mohawk and other Haudenosaunee peoples. As we are mourning the children that never came home from former Kamloops as Indian Residence School in BC, let's remember that coming together today is significant. Healing, reconciliation, and the dismantling of systemic anti-Indigenous racism and colonial violence will require each and everyone's commitment. One way to move forward on this path is to do memory work. This is something we can do every day and something we can strengthen every year on September 30th, the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Pour que le traumatisme des pensionnats soit reconnu et intégré au processus de réconciliation, le gouvernement a adopté à l'unanimité un projet de loi faisant du 30 septembre une journée de commémoration nationale. Cette journée est importante. Les séquelles des pensionnats sont profondes et se ressentent au-delà des générations. Le 30 septembre de chaque année offrira l'occasion de réfléchir et de sensibiliser à cette tragédie tout en honorant les survivants et leurs familles. As you may know, June is National Indigenous History Month. This year also marks the 25th anniversary of the National Indigenous Peoples Day. Each year, on June 21st, we all have an opportunity to learn about the history and cultures of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, but also to recognize how colonial institutions, systemic abuse, and racism have denied them access to their own identity. Indigenous peoples have been forcibly disconnected from each other, from their communities, and from their own land. They remain connected with who they are through the strength of their wisdom, kinship, and resilience. It is our responsibility as a government to support them in the path to healing. On June 21st, 2019, we passed the historic Indigenous Languages Act to support Indigenous peoples in their efforts to reclaim, revitalize, maintain, and strengthen Indigenous languages. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes rassemblés pour souligner une étape importante de la mise en œuvre de cette loi, la nomination du premier commissaire et des premiers directeurs et directrices du Bureau du commissaire aux langues autochtones. The office will support Indigenous peoples in their efforts to reclaim, revitalize, maintain, and strengthen Indigenous languages, support research and innovation, promote Indigenous languages, and also facilitate the resolution of disputes. It is with great pleasure that I announce the appointment of Commissioner Ronald Iginis and Directors Robert Watt, Georgina Liberty, and Joan Greyeyes to the very first office of the Commissioner of Indigenous Languages. The Commissioner and Directors were chosen for their expertise, passion, and leadership, as well as their deep understanding of Indigenous communities and cultures, and their vast appreciation for Indigenous languages and their vitality. Ils apportent avec eux des atouts précieux, notamment leur expérience personnelle et professionnelle dans le milieu des langues autochtones. I have every confidence that they will bring to the Office of the Commissioner of Indigenous Languages exceptional strengths that will effectively support the aspirations of Indigenous peoples in seeing their languages flourish and grow for generations to come. Je tiens également à saluer toutes les personnes présentes et toutes celles qui nous ont offert un appui soutenu au cours des dernières années pour élaborer et mettre en œuvre la loi sur les langues autochtones. Il s'agit d'une priorité pour notre gouvernement que d'appuyer les peuples autochtones dans leurs efforts continus et soutenus pour se réapproprier leur langue. A tremendous amount of work remains to be done to revitalize these valuable languages, but we have reasons to hope that in the future, Indigenous languages will be spoken even more widely. They are fundamental to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and to Canadian society as a whole. Miigwech, Nakumik, Merci, Merci, thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I would now like to invite Commissioner Ronald E. Iginis to speak.
Jullie in Elias Stilstemmes Elkstuchen, Hochaita Poltense, Hochaita Palmucht, the Mix, the Aquas, the Aquas. Dutskin as Suschon as Hochaita Palmuch and the Mix, the Suschontum. The Suquapan Hulo, he is full Iantelminus. As I said in my language, Suquapanchin, I would like to recognize all Indigenous peoples in Canada in their homelands. As I speak to you from my homeland in Suquapan territory, and as we embark on the work to stand up our languages. And I would like to recognize Grand Chief Bellegarde of the APTN, President Obed of ITK, and President Charcier of MNC, as well as the Minister of Canadian Heritage, Honorable Minister Gilbeau. For those of us who are survivors of the oppression of our languages as part of the cultural and physical genocide wrought on us by the state and supported by churches that ran residential schools and other institutional ways in which our languages were stigmatized and oppressed. The day that Bill C-91, the Indigenous Languages Act, received royal assent on June 21st, 2019, was memorable and was a long time in coming. It is a rare piece of legislation co-developed by Indigenous peoples and the Canadian government, and many of us are seeing it as a way forward as we seek reconciliation, restitution, and move towards a just future. For those of us who have passionately cared about and fought for the future of our Indigenous languages, getting here has consumed nearly a lifetime, and we have lost many speakers and elders in this process. To them, I dedicate my work, and especially to those children who never got the chance to pass on their languages. I thank the many Indigenous organizations that were consulted in the process of selecting the first Commissioner of Indigenous Languages for having faith and trust in me as you supported my appointment. And I thank the Department of Canadian Heritage and the Government of Canada for facilitating the process. I am proud and thankful that as First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we have been able to unite and work together towards a common purpose of reclaiming, rebuilding, and strengthening our languages. More than 70 across the country, most of them severely endangered. Time and again, and in eloquent words, our elders have told us our inseparable connection with our Indigenous languages. They capture each of our many thousands of years of living on our homelands and embody the wisdom of our ancestors. They connect us in spirit, body, and thought to our homelands, laws, ways of thinking, and communicating. Among younger generations and youth, we see the thirst and deep commitment to reconnect with our languages and knowledges. As we reclaim and rebuild our languages, there is much work ahead of us. Together with my 3 directors, I look forward to serving you all in this task. Some of our languages are hanging by a thread, having lost all or nearly all of their speakers, others still more viable. However, we have inspiring stories from each speech communities in different parts of Canada where groundbreaking work of reclaiming and normalizing the use of our languages is taking place. This gives us hope and shows we can turn this around, giving the right resources, institutional support, and especially working together. For all too long, our Indigenous languages have been silenced, oppressed, and stigmatized. Therefore, we call on all people in Canada to destigmatize, support, and celebrate our languages and breathe new life into them. Thank you and merci.
Miigwech, Commissioner. I would now like to invite Director Robert Watt to speak.
Nakomik Rapi Vunga, Kutra Mujot Sungat, Huviaso Hato Yumarialo Vunga, Tamatamunga Ilaurama. Ukhausi Butan Anin Tualamat, Ukhausi Limatset Aninamata. Nirwakta Venugarani, Tamatamunga Pinasugamot, Huviaso Tumarivunga. Ipasa Katigi Sherlock to good. How a Mautigalagata, Takwa Gulangalak to good. Commissioner Ignis Tusagata Tigo Suli Chairman, Nakoritsugulo, Sibulitigilangalatigo, Takualo Pingasugata, Ikayoptigi Yaulangatsuta, Pivilim Hatigo, Commissioner Ignis Tusagovit, Tusajutit. Pivilimatigu sapumilangayu ilini. Nutame alla vita alla viliuga halanga vallegata. Nutatsiami. Kava makuno pitutsimangitumi. Tanna nakokto. Tanna alla vinuta nutatsiagulune. Ngutivalli alangatigu pinaftitagia halangatsutalo. Takwalo pinsu hatigilangayakka pinsu hatigilangayugu. Sivuli Patsiami Katigik Luta Sune Sivuli Uya Hatalangamanga Tukita Hatigiga Halangalata Immigonati Tugalorvit Ilagi Tugalorce Nule Liugalor Tufaluni Timiuce, House Lerena Moangajone Isumalo Tehatuarce Sapumizio Langalatu Hawasa Hataguna Hatautalo. Tanna Primarealo, Acunialo, Uhausibut, Pinasuacto Geharninga, Pivitsatat Geharninga, Acunialo, Hilanari Jomat, Nakumimarelo, Pivihatitokan Narama, Karsi Chalangabut, Uhausik, Aninaktuaramat, Atunit, Uhausibut, Aninaktuinamata, Tanna Tunga Vigilugo, Pinso Hatigi Chalangabut. Thank you very much.
Miigwech, Director. I would now like to invite Georgina Liberty to speak. Director Georgina Liberty to speak.
Tanse, and good morning, everyone. Sadly, Tanse is probably about one of the only words that I know in my Michif language, despite the fact that my father was a fluent speaker. It's one of the reasons that I'm so pleased and honored to have this opportunity to be working for our Indigenous languages and to revitalize, strengthen, bring them back however we can do that as this new commission. I firstly would like to thank Deputy Minister Gina for the prayer this morning that started us off in a good way. I'd like to acknowledge my President, Clement Charcier. Good morning, President Charcier, and national leaders, Grand Chief Perry Bellegarde, and Chief I'm sorry if I get his name wrong, but President Natan Obed. Thank you for supporting us through this new creation of the Commission of the Office of Indigenous Languages. We all acknowledge the support that you give us as leaders, and I'm very thrilled to say that I'm bringing you greetings from Treaty 1 and the homeland of the Métis in Manitoba here. So I want to acknowledge that this is where I am. I also want to say congratulations to Commissioner Iginis. I really am, after yesterday's first greetings and meeting, I'm thrilled to be a part of this new commission and to work with you under your guidance and with your guidance in the years ahead. We're very honored to be a part of this new office, this new appointment. I'd like to acknowledge our federal ministers that are also partaking today, and thank Minister Gilbeau, particularly, who I believe we will be meeting quite often with, maybe through with Commissioner Iginis as our future unfolds with the new department. Michif is one of the fastest dying languages, and it's going to be really critical in the work ahead. We're losing many of our speakers very fast. Age pays no attention to anyone, and so sadly that language is very quickly dying, as many other languages are as well. So I know we have a lot of hard work ahead of us. I'm really looking forward to working together as a team. Commissioner Iginis started us off yesterday really well with many words of encouragement and strength, I think, that he's going to offer us. And so I look forward to working with Director Robert and with Director Joan as a united front as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director. I would now like to invite Director Joan Greyeyes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Deputy Minister, for the blessing this morning. Very much appreciated that. Itatam iskatinawao Muskeg Lake Nitakisun. I'm from the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation. My name is Joan Greyeyes. I'm here in Treaty 6 territory in Saskatchewan. I extend my sincere gratitude to Language Revitalization for the work that has been done to document and revitalize our Indigenous languages, and to our Indigenous leadership, past and present, for their vision and continued commitment to achieve legislation that supports the survival of our Indigenous languages. It is because of your dedication and commitment in the revitalization of Indigenous languages that we are here today to announce the Office of the Commissioner of Indigenous Languages. I am humbled and very grateful for the opportunity to work in such a unique role, moving forward with a dynamic team to implement the Indigenous Languages Act, and as AFN Chief Perry Bellegarde has stated many times, in a good way. To utilize the Act to elevate Indigenous languages to the forefront of the conversation, something that hasn't been done for a long time. This Act enables Canadians to talk about Indigenous languages in everyday conversation, which is something that needs to happen for us to be able to promote our Indigenous languages in Canada. We want to support the efforts of Indigenous peoples to reclaim, revitalize, maintain, and strengthen their Indigenous languages. We also want to ensure that Indigenous people have a voice in determining the initiatives needed to support language revitalization within their homes, within their families, and within their communities. We want to facilitate self-determined language initiatives. For example, because I come from a post-secondary background, I've always wanted to see our languages have an educational path, something from the elementary level all the way to doctoral studies. And the closest I've seen that happen in Canada today is at the University of Victoria. And I wanted to mention the University of Victoria for all the great work that they've been doing. In closing, I look forward to working with my colleagues and Indigenous peoples across Canada to reclaim, revitalize, maintain, and strengthen our treasured Indigenous languages. Well, thank you all. Thank you.
Miigwech, Director. I would now like to invite National Chief Perry Bellegarde to deliver his remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to say good morning to you all as friends and relatives this very, very special day. Acknowledging Gina Wilson for the prayer. Thank you. Nista pixkenehe onopsisi, kanaskumten wa kakya no temtik no akomagnak, and mutain and smantok naskumitnan. Aho mataki ape pinaman. A little bit in Nakota as well, Cree Nakota, but as well acknowledging Gina for the prayer, and as well to you all as friends and relatives, and acknowledge as well the ministers on the line, Minister Gilbeau and Minister Bennett, and as well as Minister Miller, and my colleagues, leaders, President Charcier, President Obed. You see, I witness, I lift you all up, and to 4 very special people as well. We're here to mark this very, very important day. And so Commissioner Ron Iginis, thank you for putting your name forward to accept this challenge. To the directors, Joan Greyeyes, Georgina Liberty, and Robert Watt, thank you so much for putting your names forward and for the challenge of revitalizing all of our Indigenous languages. I also want to acknowledge 2 former ministers that helped build C91, Minister Jolie and as well Minister Pablo Rodriguez. And as leaders, we always stand on the shoulders of those that have come before us to do something good for our people and our country. So I lift you all up. I'm very honored to witness this day today, the implementation of C91. We know for far too long our languages have been in jeopardy. Forced assimilation via the residential schools and other government measures meant to wipe out our languages. And I've said this many, many times, that our language is so important to our right to self-determination and self-government and nationhood. We need to have our own languages and our own laws, our own lands, our own people, and our own identifiable forms of government. 5 elements for that inherent right to self-determination to be recognized globally. So our language is so fundamental to our being. And this C91 is a result of a promise made through the Indigenous Languages Act, which commits to supporting action that will revitalize, strengthen, and protect our languages. And I've said this before as well, that studies have shown so clearly that when you are fluent in your language, you know who you are and where you come from, you're more successful in school and therefore more successful in life. This is very important. To Minister Gilbeau, I say a big thank you for your dedication to the implementation of C91. Thank you for delivering on a promise to supporting the efforts of our First Nations leaders and language champions across Canada. Our Indigenous languages should be viewed as the national treasures that they are. They're Canada's national treasures. In addition to these beautiful languages of English, and en français, mais oui, je parle français un petit peu. Bienvenue, mes amis. C'est bon, c'est magnifique. I just want to say that what I want most is to hear our old people whispering our ancient stories into the ears of our young people in our languages, because they're connected to our lands and our ceremonies. So with that, I'll say, thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup, Miigwech. Thank you. I love it. Chief Bellegarde, I would now like to invite President Natan Obed to deliver his remarks.
Nusakut. Good afternoon, everyone. This is indeed a very special day. I want to start by recognizing the new commissioner, Commissioner Iginis, and then also the directors Watt, Greyeyes, and Liberty. You have an incredible opportunity and a lot of work ahead, and we will be here at ITK and Inuit across Inuit Nunangata and wherever Inuit live to interact with and to support you in the work moving forward. I also want to recognize Minister Gilbeau and also Minister Bennett and Minister Miller, who are also on the Zoom call here today. Thank you for your leadership and the work you have done within Cabinet to ensure that we get to this particular day. Because today really marks a fundamental step towards the full implementation of the Indigenous Languages Act. For Inuit, Inuktitut remains the primary language of use in much of Inuit Nunangat. However, each one of our regions ranges in a state of maintenance, revitalization, and reclamation. It is important to note that we are the only Indigenous people in this country that live in, that have a jurisdiction that has a linguistic majority of an Indigenous language, and that is the jurisdiction of Nunavut. Inuit also live in Nunatsiavut in Northern Labrador, Nunavik in Northern Quebec, and also in the Inuvialuit region in the Northwest Territories. But the conversations that we have had with the federal government and with Canadians, I think, are also changing the reality and perceptions that Canadians have about where Indigenous languages actually are. There are some Indigenous languages, such as Inuktitut, that are still strong and thriving and demand the necessary supports, as do all Indigenous languages. But there is a certain utility in the positions that Inuit have put forward to date. The purpose of the particular piece of legislation that you are now such a fundamental part of implementing links back to those positions that Inuit have taken and all Indigenous languages have taken along this path, which is that our languages are the founding languages of Canada and demand the respect not only of Canadians generally, but also within the human rights elements in the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and building upon the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and their findings, especially calls to action 13 and 15. There is so much work to do, and we are so proud that we are in this moment where we have Indigenous leaders in this commission and can look forward to working with you on the implementation of this work. Your expertise and your knowledge will be a tremendous source of information and support available to Indigenous governments, organizations, and communities. I'm not trying to put too much pressure on the directors and the commissioner, but this is something that we have been working towards for such a long time. Inuit Tapui Kanatami welcomes the opportunity to work with the new commissioner and the directors, and will work with the Canadian government as it understands its obligations under new legislation and existing legislation, and how best this country can respect the existing human rights that we have, especially in relation to the use of and the ongoing vibrancy of all the Indigenous languages in this country. Nakumik.
Miigwech, President Obed. I would now like to invite President Clement Charcier to deliver his remarks.
Merci, Gina, por la prière camilla nanaskunku. Congratulations, Commissioner Iginis and Directors Watt, Liberty, and Greyeyes. Georgina, your father, Elder George Fleury, would be so proud of you, as we all are. Commissioner, directors, as you take up this historic role, know that our expectations are high. We know that your work will demand a lot of your time and energy. The Métis Nation is a proudly multilingual nation. 20 years ago, the Métis Nation declared Michif our official language. However, estimates suggest that there are well fewer than 1,000 Michif speakers still alive, and we are very concerned for the survival of the Michif language, along with other Indigenous languages spoken by Métis people, such as Saulteaux, Dene, and Cree. We need your support to do the urgent work of revitalizing, protecting, maintaining, and strengthening Michif and other Métis Nation languages. In fact, UNESCO has categorized Michif as critically endangered, the final level before extinction, meaning that without urgent action, there is a very real danger that Michif as a living language could be lost within this generation. We strongly believe that a 10-year nation-to-nation, government-to-government Canada Métis Nation language accord would meet the unique needs and challenges for the revitalization of Michif and other Métis Nation languages spoken by our citizens. We also want to see a new funding model implemented as soon as possible. Funding levels allocated to support the Métis Nation must reflect our real needs, including the fact that Michif is critically endangered. Stable, long-term funding to enable the development and delivery of strategic and effective programs is urgently required. The Métis Nation is proud of the work we have done, along with the Assembly of First Nations and the Inuit Pilat Kanatami, of course, with Heritage Canada. And I also commend the previous ministers who have dedicated their efforts, along with, of course, Minister Gilbeau, in the co-development and now the implementation of the Indigenous Languages Act. The establishment of the Office of the Commissioner of Indigenous Languages is a central part of the implementation of that act. Today is a celebration in this long journey that has really just begun. Merci, thank you, merci.
Miigwech, President Charcier, and miigwech to all our panelists for their remarks and participation today. It is now time for the question and answer period with the media. Bonjour et merci aux membres de les médias pour votre participation aujourd'hui. Pour la période de questions et réponses, je vous demanderai d'utiliser la fonction main levée pour que je puisse vous identifier et vous accorder chacun votre tour la parole. To ask a question, please use the raise hand function to show your interest and I will call you in turn. We'd ask you to identify yourself, your outlet, and who your question is directed to. We will take one question and follow up per media outlet. Nous allons prendre une question et un suivi par organisme. Patient with me while I find. All right, we have Rafi with the CBC.
Thank you very much for taking my questions. My first would be to the Indigenous leaders on the panel today. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the timing of this announcement 2 weeks after the awful discovery at Kamloops and 6 years after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission made this recommendation in the first place. Thanks.
I can respond.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And to me, it's not so much of a timing issue. I think it's just the full implementation of C91. And I'm thankful and grateful that they're implementing C91 fully. As I mentioned before, language is so vital. You know, and the residential schools were the biggest part of wiping out First Nations languages in Canada. And so now we're moving on. And I think all 94 calls to action, including this one, are being implemented as expeditiously as possible. And I think there is a momentum, not only in Canada, but the world, to see justice and reconciliation happen. And this is all part of the process. So I am thankful and grateful for this day. And I think there's an immense challenge for our 4 new team players from the commissioner with the 3 directors to do as much as they can. And we're going to be here to help and support them along the way.
Thanks. I'll also weigh in. The discovery in Kamloops of the mass graves continues to, I think, be on the minds of all Indigenous people and many Canadians in all of the work that we do. So this particular announcement, the announcement last week in relation to the implementation of the Murdered Missing Indigenous Women and Girls National Inquiries calls for justice, all are colored by the uncovering of these atrocities and these new realities about just where we sit in 2021. Luckily, we have this body of work that we have started a long time ago that will lead us away from the scenarios that created Kamloops and residential schools, and turn back towards Indigenous self-determination and respect for Indigenous rights. We have always had rights in this country. We are only now beginning to work with the Government of Canada in implementing those existing rights in a way that moves away from our colonial legacy and towards a path of reconciliation. This particular commission and the implementation of the Indigenous Languages Act is essential for our shared vision of prospering Indigenous languages, and also a framework of access, respect for, and also recourse and remedy against scenarios in which Indigenous peoples cannot use our languages to access government services, to access education, to access revitalization measures. This commission will play a role in understanding those realities, those barriers, and then providing findings that help governments, whether they provincial, territorial, or federal, and Indigenous organizations across this country chart the best path forward for reclamation, revitalization, maintenance, and strength of our Indigenous languages.
Yes, Clement Charcier. I don't believe it's also a matter of timing. This has been in the works for a while, and as we know, it does take time for initiatives to unfold as they should. And I'm very pleased that it's actually happening. But in terms of residential schools and the tragic findings that have been taking place and continue to take place, from the Métis Nation perspective, we also have suffered tremendously by past governmental actions. And all I can say is, adding on to the words of President Obed, that for the Métis Nation, for true and lasting reconciliation to take place, the federal government, I know Minister Bennett is listening, must deal with the Métis residential schools, particularly the one in Île-à-la-Crosse that I went to for 10 years. And as a result, I'm not fluent as I should be in, the Michif language. As well, of course, we're excluded from the 60s scoop settlement. So for the Métis Nation, there is a long way to go yet, but for every step forward even though it's incremental, I think it's a success for all Indigenous peoples. And today's announcement is just another one of those steps forward. So I'm pleased, with these developments.
Thank you very much. Rafi, did you have a follow-up question?
I did, and thank you all for your answers. And Commissioner Iginis, my congratulations to you. And my next question would be for you, as well as for any of the federal government ministers on the call who'd like to respond. Do you view today's announcement as an important first step toward recognition that Canada does not only have 2 official languages? Thank you.
Most definitely. That we are the Indigenous languages are, after all, have been here on this land for thousands of years. And we've often stated that Indigenous languages are the founding languages of this country. And that must be recognized. And with this language legislation, we are now moving in that direction. And we look forward to the great results of us working together and with the federal government in standing up and revitalizing our languages across the country.
Thank you, Commissioner. Perhaps I can add. Clearly, we are on a path to reconciliation, and today's announcement, as many have mentioned, is a significant step on that journey. It is not the end of the journey, far from it. And the goal of the Indigenous Languages Act is to try and ensure that we no longer lose any Indigenous languages in this country. And to that end, we have done many things. Certainly the adoption of Bill C-91 is a significant element. But when we came into power in 2015, the federal government invested roughly $5 million for all Indigenous languages in this country. This year, we're a little bit shy of 60 millions. Thanks to the announcement made by Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Freeland, this amount, this close to 60 millions, will be almost 120 millions next year. And I think as time goes by, we will continue to ensure that we provide adequate long-term resources for Indigenous peoples in this country, so that these languages can, some, like President Obed was saying, are already spoken by many, but to ensure that they become, that everyone in their languages become fluent, and that's really what we're trying to achieve here.
Briefly, Rafi, if I could add a couple elements on how Indigenous Services Canada interplays with this. We have a primary role in supporting languages, Indigenous languages, at the K-12 level. Some of the budgetary investments in the past years have earmarked $1,500 per First Nations child on reserve for language and culture vitalization. You mentioned official languages, but C-91 speaks about inherent rights with respect to languages that existed before my ancestors got here or Minister Gilbeau's ancestors got here. These are inherent rights, and they can't be removed. The residential school system tried to do that by forbidding languages, rich languages with beautiful ways of expressing ideas. As National Chief Bellegarde said, it's about how you frame your ideas, your mind, your identity, your culture. And the studies have proven that you do better in school if you know your language. As someone that comes from Quebec, this is not lost on me in the struggle for preserving the French language, but we talk about languages where French and English were used to suppress these beautiful languages that have existed on this land far before our ancestors got here. That law was transformational. It was only the start, and the criticism, if you remember, in around the adoption of it was that it didn't have earmarked funds for it. Well, now we're in the hundreds of millions, as well as the additional amounts that Indigenous Services Canada puts in for language and education. But the vitality of a language is not measured in electoral cycles. It's measured in generational cycles, in 30-year increments. So we'll just have to keep being relentless at allowing allowing the voices to take that place that we have taken instead of them for so long, and speaking in the language of inherent rights, as well as the funding and the financial capital of Canada. Canada contribute to righting historical wrong and fixing it for the future.
Thank you very much for those answers. We now have Melanie Riccio from Nunatsiaq News. Melanie, if you could tell us who the question is directed to.
Hi, yes, thank you. My question is for Director Watt.
Great, please go ahead.
Hi, so I know many Inuit were hoping to see representation in this office, and now they have it with you here. Can you speak about your priorities a little bit related to Inuit languages specifically and what they can expect to see from you in this position?
Niriyo hatta unomata Inuit katok te hatsialanga hunat loyummat takutiguna ni wakta loyugama yung tutsikalanga tsanangallo takkuak pinso hatigilanga jakka pinso hatigitsialugit naruna ya hatigitsialugit sunay sibuliu yoge halangang mangat kupek miugamalle inutsunga sitamamata nuna hakfiujuit Inuit nuna hakfingit nuna vumiulo nuna tia vumiulo nuna vimiulo amalo inuvialo miulo ukausi hatigi samigata tukisi hatigi galwaksuta tana ipigi vakkako sibuliuji larigomalanga jaga na sialutata ukausi vut attanettu seagalo nertawattu galua sikutsayattigut hawesa gomallagilanga junga hanulluatigijumi ukhausivut attanettu mangat attanaktu mangat pinso hati khalanga junga pinso aktawirtuni singitsi kaswalanga changittugut sapumilanga jugut ammalutanna allavik tukisiyaktigut hawesa gunnalangamman hawesa gumalanga bugut lakhagut sikisiani inuhatikka piyagunna hattalangatta pimmaqialulanga jumaannauningani ilautsia huyilanga jugut tanna allavitsi tahatausi kawamakkunu pitutsimangito kigun sagaluaqtagi.
Thank you very much, Director. All right, I'm seeing here. Oh, Melanie, sorry, did you have a follow-up question?
No, that's it. That's everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I'm seeing here that we don't have any other hands raised for questions. Once again, oh, I do actually. I have Callie Giacconi. I'm sorry if I didn't say that properly. If you could just tell us your outlet, that would be wonderful, and who the question is directed to.
Hi there. Yeah, so my name is Callie, and I work for the Eastern Door, which is, you know, a newspaper that covers the Mohawk community of Ganawage and Ganasudage. My question wasn't for anyone specifically, but I was wondering if perhaps one of you guys could maybe provide a more specific message, maybe towards the Mohawk community in Ganawage or Ganasudage about this announcement. Thank you.
All languages across this country are very important to us, and we will be establishing our work plan and looking at all in Indigenous languages across the country, how we can be the champions for all languages across the country. And we're pleased that the Mohawk Nation is one of the areas in which they are good examples of how they have a wonderful immersion school on Six Nations Reserve, and we'll be looking to them for inspiration as well as to work with them in the further revitalization of their language, along with other communities. And there are, such as the Squamish Nation has a language immersion program, and the Squamish Nation, they're doing very well. They I believe, have no more elderly fluent speakers or capable elderly fluent speakers, but they've created a cohort of young speakers who are becoming teachers. Champagne Asiac, First Nation in the Yukon, has an immersion program, and they will be an inspiration that we will be looking at as well, along with the Saanich or Notchathan near Victoria, as well as we as the Secwepemc Nation have an immersion program near Kamloops, the Tifatom School. So there are a growing number of programs and education in languages, and that we wish to support and help grow and foster them.
Thank you.
Those are just a few examples that we have. There are many across the country that will provide inspiration to all of us. Thank you.
Would I be able to add on?
Of course.
Probably here, just to want to stress that this office for the Indigenous languages will also be catering to urban Indigenous population. So it's not just for remote or in reserves. It's encompassing anybody that lives in Canada, no matter where you are. We're here to support you.
Thank you very much, Director. Callie, did you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. So now we have Shari Nareen from Edmonton. If you could tell us who your question is for.
I'm from Windspeaker. My question is for Commissioner Iginis. How long is your term, and what would you have liked to have accomplished by the end of your term?
You're on mute, Commissioner.
Oh. Thank you for that question. Well, my term is for 5 years, and in those 5-year term, we hope to have well-funded programs and resources for Indigenous languages to revitalize and all their languages across the country, in which the language learners, as I've watched across this country through my years, elders who have worked out of broom closets, fundraising, and trying to have the intergenerational transmission of their languages to their children. We hope that, and we will hope, no, not hope, but we will have proper and sufficient and ongoing resources for all Indigenous languages. That's what we'll fight for, and we will hope, and I will try and ensure that we accomplish that.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Shari, did you have a follow-up question? No, I don't think so. There's no more hands. Okay, I think that is it in terms of questions for today. I just want to go through my list very quickly here. All right, so thank you to the media for your participation today. If you do end up having any further questions or seek clarity, please not hesitate to contact the department's media relations team. S'il vous plaît, nous contacter avec les relations avec les médias. Ça nous ferait plaisir de vous répondre. I hope that everyone has a wonderful Monday, and miigwech to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Merci beaucoup.